Usually when I make this video each month, I try and limit myself to 10. 10 books that are a nice mix of what's coming out this month and what I'm planning to read from my TBR this month. This time it's 12. That should tell you a lot. And this stack is a nice 50-50 split between review copies of amazing things that are coming out in July and things that I've recently bought or have been sitting on my TBR for a while and I've got to get to them and I'm really excited. Let's dig in. But before we do, just a quick reminder or an announcement for anyone who doesn't know, I edit books. So if you're a writer with a manuscript, whether it be a short story, a novella, or a novel, and you really want it to be published, whether you're going down the independent publishing route or you're looking for a publisher, send it to me and I will edit it, I will polish it, I will make it perfect. I will make it shine so that it's ready for publication. And as a kind of spin-off from editing, I'm also doing sensitivity reading. As a queer and trans person, I am offering sensitivity reading for any manuscripts that feature queer and trans people, and you want to make sure that everything's smooth, everything's okay. Send it to me for sensitivity reading, which is a really hard thing to say, or for editing. My rates are brilliant and I'm very good at what I do. Let's start by talking about some of the really cool books that are coming out in July that I'm planning on reading and reviewing. Although, truth be told, this first one actually came out at the very end of June, and for reasons that will soon become clear, I didn't have time to get to it, but it'll be the first thing I review in July. This is Monstrilio. I don't know why I said it like that. This is by Gerardo Samano Cordova. He's a Mexican author living in New York, and this was published in the UK just now by my good friends at Dead Ink Books. They sent me this review copy and I am very excited. Let me read you the blurb and you'll see why. First off, the blurb features a quote from Sarah Gailey, who is going to feature in this list themselves very shortly. Gailey said, "Simply exquisite, easily one of my favourite reads this year." Sarah Gailey's incredible, you don't need much more persuasion, but you're gonna get it. Grieving mother Magos cuts out a piece of her deceased 11-year-old son Santiago's lung. Acting on fierce maternal instinct and the dubious logic of an old folktale, she nurtures the lung until it gains sentience, growing into the carnivorous little Monstrilio she keeps hidden away within the walls of her family's decaying Mexico City estate. Eventually, Monstrilio begins to resemble the Santiago he once was, but the innate impulses, though curbed by his biological and chosen family's communal care, threaten to destroy this fragile second chance at life. Oh my god! I am so excited to read this creeping, gothic, weird little horror story. Although it's not little, it's actually quite beefy. Dead Ink have also been killing it on social media recently. This cover really lends itself to a lot of fun memes and they are going wild with it. Follow Dead Ink on all the social medias and you'll see what I mean. This is going to be a lot of fun. Then we have this, Little Rot by Akwaeke Emezi. Now, the only Emezi novel I've ever read was their debut, Freshwater. Since then, they have consistently put out a lot of different books in a lot of different genres, including young adult fiction. And I have over and over again been so tempted to pick one up and just not. I annoy myself more and more every time I do it. But this time their UK publisher Phoebus sent me this copy of Little Rot, so I have no excuse. Freshwater was incredible, by the way. It's a very smart, very savvy, very fascinating little thing. And this is Little Rot. When Kalu drops Ima at the airport, it marks the end of their 4-year relationship. Shattered and broken open, he thinks that's the last he will see of his girlfriend. But Ima is drawn back into Lagos, to the scandalous, decadent nightlife of her best friend. Reeling from the breakup, Kalu accepts an exclusive invitation to one of his best friend's sordid global parties. A way to escape, if only for a night. Just as two Nigerian sex workers visiting from Kuala Lumpur collide into the scene, everything goes to hell when Kalu's actions plunge them all into a whirling descent through the corrupt and glittering underbelly of the city. It is finally time to jump into the wild world of Emezi, and this sounds sordid and brilliant. Here's something incredibly exciting. Toward Eternity, the debut novel of legendary Korean to English translator Anton He, who also happens to be a very good friend of mine. Anton has written a sci-fi novel, and it's nearly out, and it's gorgeous. Anton made sure that Harper Vere sent me a copy of this, and I'm very flattered. In a near future world, a new technological therapy is quickly eradicating cancer. The body's cells are entirely replaced with nanites, android cells that not only cure those afflicted, but leave them virtually immortal. Literary researcher Yong-hoon teaches an AI how to understand poetry and creates a living, thinking machine he names Panet, meaning beloved, in honor of his husband. When Yong-hoon, himself a recipient of nanotherapy, mysteriously vanishes into thin air and then just as suddenly reappears, the event raises disturbing questions. What happened to Yong-hoon? And though he's returned, is he really himself anymore? I have enormous high hopes for this book. Anton, if you're watching, I hope that doesn't scare you. It probably doesn't, because I'm not the most intimidating thing. But I know that Anton is going to deliver something really amazing here. He is one of the most talented literary translators we have, having translated so many different things from so many different kinds of authors across so many different genres, and always doing all of it incredible justice. The man is a king of translation, thus a king of writing and literature as a whole. How could his debut novel ever be anything less than a masterpiece? I haven't even read it yet, and look how hyperbolic I'm being. Check this out, a new Banana Yoshimoto short story collection. This is Dead End Memories, translated from the Japanese into English by Asa Yoneda. Faber are being really good to me at the moment. They sent me the new Emezi book, and not only did they send me this, but they also included a brand new reprint of Kitchen. Do you like how I did that? Kitchen is Banana Yoshimoto's most famous work. I no longer have a copy of my own, so I'm really flattered and grateful that Faber sent me this. But Dead End Memories is the thing we're talking about. I will be reviewing this book in July. This cover is utterly stunning, and it feels just as nice to hold as it does to look at. It's shiny, it's tactile, it's got French flaps, which is always funny to say. And it's a collection of 5 stories which are about love and death, because that's Banana Yoshimoto's whole thing. She writes about love and death, and she does it so masterfully, over and over and over again. I finally get to reread Kitchen, which is awesome. It's a great book. But more importantly, we have a new short story collection from her. Last year, I read and reviewed her 100-page novella, Premonition, which was a very heartfelt thing. And we already have more short stories from her. This is great news, and Asa Yoneda is an amazing translator, really knocking it out of the park at the moment. Every time I pick up a new Japanese novel in translation, it's often translated by Asa Yoneda. That's great. Speaking of Anton Her, again, we have this. Now, this is a bit of a weird one. This is I Want to Die, but I Still Want to Eat Tteokbokki. I reviewed the first one. I loved it. That review is a really popular video of mine, actually. And so I got this review copy quite a while ago, a few months ago now. And it's been sitting there waiting, and I usually read and review copies, you know, a week or 2 before the book comes out, because I don't know how else to do it. But this book doesn't come out till August. However, I went into my local Waterstones, 2 days ago? And it was sitting there, on the shelf, in hardcover. Waterstones have put this book out like 2 months ahead of its launch, I guess. Or August is now out of date. Maybe it got pushed forward and I didn't know. I'm not sure. But I'm putting this on my list to read maybe late July. I'll ask Bloomsbury what the deal is, but I don't know. Waterstones pulls that shit all the time. Anyway, Anton translated this. He also translated the first one as well. This is, as I said, I Want to Die, but I Still Want to Eat Tteokbokki by Baek Se-hee. The first book was dealing with depression. It was an author and journalist recording and making notes about the sessions that she was having with her therapist. It is non-fiction, and this is just a continuation of that. Where is she now? At least on her emotional and mental health journey. What is she up to? How far has she come, if at all, since the first book? This is us returning to her life, to her therapy sessions, and seeing what's going on now. I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure it's going to be a wonderfully empathetic read. That's a lot of review copies, and I still have 2 more to talk about. This is Welcome to Dorley Hall by Alison Greaves. Neem Tree Press sent me this, and here's the blurb. Mark Vogel is like the older brother Stefan never had, but one day he disappears without a trace. A year later, after encountering a woman who looks near identical to Mark, Stefan becomes obsessed. Dozens of young men have disappeared over the years, many of them students at the Royal College of St. Almsworth, and most of them troubled or unruly. Why are students going missing? Who are the women who resemble them? And what is their connection to the selective student accommodation on the edge of campus? Dorley Hall. Stefan starts studying at St. Almsworth for one reason only, to find out exactly what happened to the women who live at Dorley Hall, and to get it to happen to him too. Given what I just read, and the fact that the author is trans, and the fact that Tori Peters read and loved this book, I'm pretty sure I'm going to adore it. Because this is a gothic mystery about transness, and I'm trans as f***. Really looking forward to this one. And my final review copy, in fact, I've had this review copy for months and I'm glad the book is finally coming out so I can finally read it, is The Body Harvest by Michael J. Seidlinger. Will is a fraud. Olivia is a wreck. They meet at a grief share group and quickly bond over their brokenness. They also have a particular hobby. They seek out sickness. Will hunts for the latest strain of flu. Olivia doesn't feel comfortable in her body if she isn't suffering from a fever. They become virus chasers, finding confidence in their ability to conquer every affliction they come across. They soon discover an online community of chasers called The Source, and discover that their hobby isn't all that odd when seen from the right distance. And then the mysterious Zaf literally walks into their life, claiming that he has the goods, knows where the latest outbreak will drop. Intrigued, Will and Olivia decide to take their hobby to the point of obsession, believing that if they can conquer the newest strain, nobody can hurt them. I'm kind of scared to read this because the pandemic turned me into a hypochondriac. I've been struggling with illness anxiety for quite a few years now. It is getting better. I became obsessed with the idea of getting cancer. If I saw an advert for cancer research or I read the word cancer in a book, I would drop the book, I would turn off the TV and I would curl up. I've gotten better, but this still sounds kind of nerve-wracking. I am still scared to read something that is so focused on illness. Wish me luck. Hopefully I can power through and it's worth it. A few videos back, I did a tour of the independent bookshops of Glasgow to celebrate Independent Bookshop Week. While I was at Category Is Books, a queer bookshop here in Glasgow, I picked up Cuckoo, the newest novel from Gretchen Felker Martin, author of Manhunt. Manhunt, which is somewhere behind me, is a terrifying, grotesque, brilliant piece of queer horror. I had a long chat with the bookseller about this because they had just started reading it, and oh, I am excited. I was on my Patreon Discord recently. One of my patrons is currently working their way through this and is loving it. And here's your blurb. In the summer of 1995, 7 queer kids abandoned by their parents at a remote conversion camp came face to face with it. They survived, but at Camp Resolution, everybody leaves a different person. 16 years later, only the scarred and broken survivors of that terrible summer can put an end to the horror before it's too late. The fate of the world depends on it. There are also quotes on the blurb here from Paul Tremblay, Carmen Maria Machado, and Roxane Gay. That's a big deal. Manhunt felt like a real underground horror hit, but I don't know, this feels like it's breaking into the mainstream. Good for her. That's awesome. Gretchen Felker Martin is amazing. I'm absolutely going to be reading this month. I'm sure I'll do a video on it. This'll be fun. Probably. In my last video, which was a wrap-up of everything I read in June, I very briefly mentioned going to an event here in Glasgow where my friend Heather Parry interviewed the incredible poet and sci-fi author Harry Josephine Giles. And this is Giles's newest poetry collection, Them. That event was absolutely wonderful. I got to ask a question and Giles's answer was brilliant. I asked her about the fact that she writes a lot of beautiful nature poetry, but as a trans woman, her poetry is also explicitly trans, and trans people love monsters. We identify a lot with monsters. There's a reason Frankenstein's my favorite book. And so I asked her about that crossroads between monstrosity and the purity and beauty of nature. And Giles's answer was so good. She said that nature is horrific, and she started talking about anglerfish and the difference between male and female anglerfish. It was such a great little tangent, and she used it to point out that being trans is so natural because nature is like that. Nature is monstrous and strange and exciting. It was such a good answer. Anyway, I've already read a few of the poems in here. I listened to Giles read like 5 of them out during that talk. It was really great. Them is a poetry collection very geared towards trans people. It is about our shared experiences. It is about the culture, the landscape, the politics of our current world. And I can't wait to be inspired. as a poet myself, who is getting published this month, by the way. I'll tell you a bit more about that soon. I'm sure I'm going to be enormously inspired by what's in here. During that aforementioned bookshop tour of the great indie bookshops of this city, I went to Bigglestone's Books and I picked up My Heavenly Favourite by Lucas Reineveld. Reineveld's debut novel, The Discomfort of Evening, was a shocking and incredible Dutch novel, which just a few years ago won the International Booker Prize. And now we have a kind of Lolita for the 21st century. I've heard amazing things about this book. It kind of shadow dropped. I had no idea this came out. I had it on my radar, I knew it existed, but suddenly it was out in like March or April, and I finally picked it up. I know I'm going to need a strong stomach to read this one. If you have already read My Heavenly Favourite, please let me know. I'm also now realising just how many trans books I've got here today. What's that, like 4, 5? I guess for us, Pride comes in July. Actually, Glasgow Pride is in July, and I'll be there. Anyway, hype. Now that was 10 books and I could stop there, but there were 2 books that I meant to read in June, and even though I hugely anticipated them, I was so excited to read them, and I talked at length at the start of June about how excited I was to read these, I somehow didn't get to them, and so I'm including them here at the end of this video because I'm promising myself I will read these 2 books in July. And the first is Just Like Home by Sarah Gailey. I talked about it in my last video, so I'm not gonna beat the dead horse here. I'm going to read this. I love Sarah Gailey's work. They're a great writer, and the amount of times I went into a bookshop almost buying this, and then I didn't, and eventually I did, and then I finally put it on my list to read in June, and I didn't read it in June. I need to read this thing. Similar story with The Puzzle Wood by Rosie Andrews. I loved The Leviathan. It is just behind me somewhere. Rosie Andrews is one of the most underrated authors we have right now. Even though her books are being published by big publishers in gorgeous hardbacks that clearly cost a lot of money to put together with gorgeous sprayed edges, I still don't hear enough people talk about how great she is. The Leviathan was an amazing piece of very camp, very theatrical, gothic historical horror, and now we have The Puzzle Wood, and still I'm not hearing people talk about this book. She's so great. Again, I talked about this last month, so I won't repeat myself here, but I promised myself I will read this in July. And there you go. This video is probably a bit longer than these ones usually are because 12 books and because I'm excited. Although I'm always excited. I have boundless enthusiasm for the great books that I read because I love it. And I'm loud. I studied theatre. Like that's an excuse. Anywho, got a few very, very, very exciting things happening in the next few days. Pay very close attention to this channel because a few exciting things are going up literally days from now, so keep your eyes open. Support me on Patreon if you'd like to. Remember that I have book editing services and sensitivity reading services. You can find links to all those things in the description, and subscribe for books.